The sun mercilessly punished the lands of Clearwater Valley, a small farming town in the state of Missouri that seemed trapped in time. Among golden hills and parched fields, Martha Johnson observed with concern how the cracks in the ground grew deeper each day. At 60 years old, she had faced many adversities since her husband Robert left her alone with 3 children and a plot of land that, in good times, barely provided enough to live on. "What are we going to do, Mom?" asked Hope, her youngest daughter, while wiping the sweat from her forehead. "It's the 3rd year of drought. There's nothing left to save." Martha pressed her lips together and took a deep breath. Her sun-weathered face, marked with worry lines, hid a determination that few people knew about. "There's always something to save, sweetheart. Always." That night, as the full moon illuminated the dusty streets of Clearwater, Martha lit the old oil lamp in her kitchen and pulled out a worn notebook. With her careful handwriting, she began to write names: Carol Sullivan, the town's midwife; Dorothy Jenkins, whose vegetables withstood the drought better than anyone's; Josephine Ortiz, who knew the secrets of bees. A list of women who, like her, silently sustained life in this forgotten corner of America. At dawn the following day, Martha walked to the house of the town mayor, Frank Castle, a red-cheeked man with a prominent belly who had inherited the most fertile lands in the valley. "Mr. Castle, I've come to propose something that could save Clearwater," she said without preamble. The man looked at her condescendingly, offering her a seat, as one might do when humoring a child. "And what might that be, Mrs. Johnson?" "Some prayer to St. Isidore the farmer," he replied with a mocking smile he didn't try to hide. "A cooperative, joining our plots, sharing resources, knowledge and profits, working together instead of each on our own." Frank's laughter echoed throughout the office. "A cooperative? Here, please, ma'am, go back to your chickens and leave important matters to those who know better." But Martha wasn't one to give up easily. That same afternoon, she gathered 5 women in her backyard under the shade of the only avocado tree that had survived the drought. "They've always ignored us," she said, looking at them intently. "They treat us as if we were invisible, as if our hands weren't the ones that plant, harvest, and feed. But right now, that invisibility will be our advantage." Carol, a short woman with penetrating eyes, was the first to speak. "What do you have in mind, Martha?" "Start small without making noise. Each of us will teach what she does best. Dorothy will show us her drip irrigation techniques with recycled materials. Josephine will teach us about bees. Teresa will share her knowledge of traditional plant medicine." "And where will we get the money to start?" interrupted Dorothy, always practical. Martha smiled slightly. "From our shawls." The women exchanged confused glances. "For years, each of us has kept a few coins in the corners of our shawls, for emergencies, for medicine, for things we can't tell our husbands about. The time has come to use that money." A heavy silence fell over the group. What Martha proposed was risky. If they failed, they would lose not only their savings, but also what little credibility they had in town. It was Hope, watching from the kitchen doorway, who broke the silence. "I have internet access at the town library. I can look for information about drought-resistant crops, water conservation techniques." The following weeks were filled with quiet work. In small groups, the women began to implement rainwater collection systems, prepare homemade biofertilizers, and transform an abandoned plot on the outskirts of town into an experimental community garden. The first victory came when the seeds germinated despite the relentless heat. Small green shoots emerged from the dry earth like a miracle. Soon other women began to approach, curious at first, skeptical later, and finally willing to join. Frank and the other landowners watched. With indifference, these efforts they considered women's games. Until one day, Raymond Miller, the merchant who controlled the buying and selling of products throughout the region, appeared at Martha's door. "I've been told that you all are growing vegetables without chemicals," he said, with his usual authoritarian tone. "I want to buy your entire production." Martha looked at him steadily before responding. "We're not ready to sell, Mr. Miller, we're just learning." "I set the price," insisted the man. accustomed to his word being law. "I'll pay you in advance." "Thank you, but no. When we have surplus, we will decide how and to whom to sell." Raymond's face transformed with anger. Nobody in Clearwater had said no to him in decades. "You'll regret this, Martha." Nobody challenges Raymond Miller and comes out unscathed. That afternoon, Martha gathered the women again, now more than 20. "A storm is coming," she told them. "I'm not talking about the rain we so desperately need, but the resistance we'll face. The powerful people in town don't want to see us prosper because it threatens their control. We must be prepared." And so, as the first lightning bolts illuminated the horizon, announcing the end of the drought, the women of Clearwater Valley prepared for their own storm, one that would forever change the destiny of that small forgotten town in the hills of Missouri. The rain, when it finally came, transformed Clearwater Valley. In a matter of weeks, the once desolate landscape dressed itself in green, and the women's project flourished with unexpected strength. The community garden, now protected by a water collection system designed by Hope, produced vegetables of a quality the town hadn't seen in years. "It seems like magic," commented Sarah Vaughan, one of the newcomers to the group, while holding a perfectly red and firm tomato. "How is it possible to produce this without chemicals?" Dorothy smiled, proudly caressing the leaves of a pepper plant. "It's not magic, friend. It's knowledge. The knowledge our grandmothers had and we've been forgetting by listening to those who sold us poisons disguised as progress." News of the success of the community gardens spread like wildfire, reaching as far as Riverdale, the neighboring town. One morning, a dusty Jeep stopped in front of Martha's house. From it descended Ellen Foster, a representative of a regional cooperative. "We've heard about your project," she said after introductions. "We want to propose an alliance. We can provide transportation and access to larger markets in exchange for a portion of your production." That proposal divided the group. Some, like Carol, distrusted any external offer. Others saw an opportunity to expand. After hours of debate, they agreed on a test. They would send a small part of their harvest with Ellen and evaluate the results. 3 days after this agreement, a rumor began to spread through Clearwater. Someone had seen Hope, Martha's daughter, storing money in a backpack and acting suspiciously. "They say the girl is diverting funds from the cooperative," Teresa whispered to Martha one afternoon. "Raymond Miller is telling everyone around town that she stole from you and is planning to flee to the city." Martha's face hardened. She knew her daughter well, but she also knew the destructive power of rumors. That same night, she called an emergency meeting. "My daughter has been unjustly accused," she said with a firm but calm voice. "And instead of defending her with words, we'll do it with facts. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we'll open every notebook, every receipt, every dollar that has come in and gone out of our cooperative for everyone to see." The next morning, in the small town chapel that was lent as a neutral space, the women spread all their records on the pews. Anyone could review, ask questions, challenge. Hope, with her head held high, patiently explained each entry in detail. What no one expected was the arrival of Frank Castle and other landowners, who carefully observed each document. "It seems they're better organized than we thought," Frank murmured to Raymond Miller, who clenched his fists in frustration as he saw how his strategy to discredit the group was failing. The transparency exercise not only stopped the rumors, but strengthened the community's trust. Several men, husbands, and sons of the participants began to offer help. A tractor here, hours of work there. Even some young people who had planned to migrate to Chicago decided to stay to see what would happen with this unusual experiment. The first big test came when the cooperative decided to sell directly at the town market, without depending on intermediaries like Raymond Miller. They set up a modest stand where they offered their products at fair prices. "Who gave you permission to sell here?" Raymond demanded to know on the first day, planting himself in front of the stand with his arms crossed. "The town hall," Martha responded, showing a document signed by the town clerk. What Raymond didn't know was that the women had negotiated directly with the mayor's wife, Mrs. Linda, who secretly admired what they were accomplishing. That first sale was a resounding success. The inhabitants of Clearwater, attracted by the novelty and prices, bought almost everything before noon. However, Upon returning to the community garden, they found a desolate spectacle. Someone had broken the irrigation system and destroyed several rows of vegetables. "This is Raymond's work," said Josephine, picking up pieces of cut hose. "No one else has motives." "We can't accuse without proof," Martha replied, although deep inside she knew. Josephine was right. Far from becoming discouraged, the group redoubled its efforts. They improvised surveillance shifts and installed a rudimentary alarm system with cans and strings. The following weeks brought more sabotage. One night, several farm animals appeared dead. Another morning, they found sugar in the tank of the borrowed tractor. The tension reached its peak when Hope was ambushed while returning from the town market. 2 hooded men intimidated her and stole the day's earnings. The young woman, although frightened, managed to recognize one of them, Raymond Miller's nephew. "This has to end," exclaimed Carol at the emergency meeting. "We must report Raymond to the authorities." "What authorities?" Teresa replied bitterly. "The sheriff is his godfather." It was then that Michael Durham, a young teacher newly arrived at the town school, spoke for the first time in one of their meetings. Michael was Josephine's grandson and had returned to Clearwater after studying agronomy at the state university. "I have an idea," he said shyly. "What if we document everything? Photos, videos, testimonies. We could take the case directly to the state authorities, bypassing local officials." The proposal was approved. For a month, they meticulously recorded each incident, each veiled threat, each property damage. Michael contributed technical knowledge that improved their crops, more effective biofertilizers, plant consortium techniques that increased resistance to pests. One day, while they were installing a small greenhouse with recycled materials, Frank Castle unexpectedly appeared in the community garden, alone and without his usual entourage of flatterers. "Mrs. Johnson, could we speak privately?" The conversation that followed would change the course of Clearwater Valley's history. Frank, visibly uncomfortable, confessed that Raymond Miller was pressuring him to use his authority against the cooperative. "He says that if I don't stop you, he'll reveal certain business dealings we did in the past, dealings that weren't entirely clean." Martha listened in silence, weighing each word. "Why are you telling me this, Mr. Castle?" The man sighed, suddenly aged. "Because I've seen what you're achieving. My wife Linda can't stop talking about all of you, about how you're transforming the town, while I and the others only worry about our own benefit. I'm tired, Mrs. Johnson, tired of being a puppet for men like Raymond." That confession represented a unique opportunity. Martha, with the wisdom of someone who has navigated turbulent waters all her life, made a bold proposal: an alliance. Frank would use his position to protect the cooperative, and they would share their knowledge with all the farmers in town, including the landowners. "We don't want to overthrow anyone," Martha explained. "We just want Clearwater to prosper, for our children not to have to leave to have a dignified life." As the sun set on that unexpected agreement, no one imagined that the true test for the cooperative was yet to come. A threat that would test not only their project, but the very foundations of the community they were building. The alliance with Frank Castle altered the balance of power in Clearwater. Raymond Miller, upon learning of the betrayal of his former ally, intensified his attacks. He no longer limited himself to nighttime sabotage. Now he openly attacked in the town council, accusing the cooperative of using dubious practices and representing a danger to the region's agricultural tradition. But what Raymond didn't expect was that his greatest challenge would come in the form of a small orange butterfly. One morning, Michael Durham came running to the community garden with an alarmed expression. "The cornfields are infested," he exclaimed, showing several leaves covered with small eggs. "It's the fall armyworm. If we don't act quickly, we'll lose the entire harvest." Corn represented the cooperative's main crop for that season. They had invested almost all their savings in special heirloom seeds, drought-resistant and of high nutritional value. Losing it would mean a devastating blow. "Raymond must be celebrating," Teresa muttered bitterly. "He surely brought the pest." "Pests don't work that way," Michael corrected. "But we have a serious problem. The conventional solution would be a spray with powerful pesticides." Those words fell like a sentence, Using pesticides meant renouncing their commitment to organic farming, to months of work building a healthy ecosystem. But not using them could mean losing everything. Martha called an emergency assembly. For the first time in the cooperative's history, the vote was split almost equally. Half, led by Dorothy, argued that it was necessary to make an exception and spray. Just once won't destroy everything we've accomplished, she insisted. The other half, with Josephine at the helm, remained firm in their principles. If we give in now, when will we give in again? There must be another solution. After hours of heated debate, when it seemed that no consensus was possible, Hope asked to speak. "I've been researching," she said, showing her tablet. "There's a biological control method using trichogramma wasps. They're natural predators of the fall armyworm and don't harm other beneficial insects." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "It's true. We studied them at the university, but they're difficult to obtain and expensive. I've already contacted a laboratory in Jefferson City," Hope continued. "They can send us what we need in 2 days. The cost," she paused, "is everything we've saved for the second phase of the greenhouse." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Finally, it was Carol who spoke. "I vote for the wasps. We didn't come this far to give up at the first serious obstacle." The vote was unanimous. They would sacrifice the planned expansion to maintain their principles. The following weeks were a battle against time. They applied the wasps following the instructions carefully, complemented with preparations of repellent plants, according to Josephine's traditional knowledge, and established surveillance shifts to manually remove any eggs they found. The effort was exhausting, but effective. They managed to save approximately 70% of the crop, enough to meet their commitments and keep seeds for the next cycle. This victory, although costly, gave them unexpected notoriety. A researcher from the University of Missouri, who had followed their case through Michael, invited them to present their experience at a state congress on sustainable agriculture. Martha and Hope were selected as representatives. For Martha, who had never left the region, the trip to Jefferson City represented a greater challenge than facing Raymond Miller. "I don't know how to talk like educated people," she confessed to Hope the night before leaving. "They'll see me as an ignorant old woman." "They'll see you as what you are, Mom, a leader who is transforming her community with wisdom and dignity." At the Congress, they faced condescending looks and questions designed to make them stumble. But when Martha began to speak, with simple words but full of the authority that comes from lived experience, the auditorium fell silent. Her sincere account of the challenges, failures, and successes of the cooperative moved even the most skeptical academics. At the end of her presentation, they received a standing ovation. An important state newspaper published a report on the Guardians of Clearwater, as they were dubbed, and several environmental organizations became interested in their project. The recognition brought with it unexpected news. The state government announced a rural infrastructure improvement program, and Clearwater Valley was among the communities selected to receive support. They would build a paved road to the main highway and a small collection center with solar refrigeration. What should have been cause for celebration unleashed a new crisis. The announcement attracted businessmen interested in the organic trend to Clearwater. Suddenly, representatives from food companies appeared offering exclusive contracts, investors wanting to buy land, and even a multinational interested in patenting some of their traditional farming techniques. Raymond Miller, seeing an opportunity for revenge, allied himself with these new actors. He began to spread the idea that the cooperative was hindering progress by rejecting offers that would bring true prosperity to the town. Some families began to doubt. The promises of well-paid jobs and accelerated modernization were tempting after decades of marginalization. The tension escalated when an agribusiness company offered to buy all the cooperative's land at a price 5 times higher than its market value. The condition, they had to leave the place in 3 months. "It's an offer you can't refuse," said the company representative during a community assembly. "Think of your children, of the future you could give them with that money." To everyone's surprise, it was Frank who stood up to respond. "A year ago, I would have been the first to sign," he said in a measured voice. "I would have sold not only my land, but the soul of this town for much less. But today, I see something that money can't buy: dignity. These women have taught us that we can progress without destroying ourselves. That true value isn't in how much we sell, but in how much we build together. His words unleashed a heated debate that extended for days. Finally, Martha proposed a radical solution: create a community foundation that would legally protect the land and the cooperative's work model. The land would not belong to individuals, but to the community, ensuring that no person could sell or mortgage what belonged to everyone. If we want Clearwater to have a future, she argued, we must think beyond ourselves, beyond even our children. We must think of our children's children. The proposal was put to a vote in a community referendum. After intense campaigns where both Raymond and Martha deployed all their arguments, the result favored the foundation by a narrow margin. The agribusiness company withdrew, not without warning that they would regret rejecting progress. But, far from regretting it, the community of Clearwater found its own path forward. A year after that crucial decision, the cooperative had grown to include almost the entire town. They had diversified their production, incorporated appropriate technologies, and established alliances with neighboring communities to create a fair trade network. Martha, feeling the weight of the years, decided to step aside from the operational management. In an emotional ceremony, she symbolically handed over the keys to the community warehouse, now the foundation's headquarters, to Lucy, Carol's granddaughter, a brilliant young woman who had studied business administration to return and strengthen the project. "We haven't conquered the world," Martha said in her farewell speech. "Clearwater remains a small dot on the map of America, but we have conquered something more important: the right to decide our own destiny." That afternoon, as the sun set behind the hills of Clearwater Valley, Martha observed from her porch the new generations taking the relay. Children played in the newly renovated town square, young people discussed new projects, and the elderly shared stories on the benches. Raymond Miller had left town, unable to accept his defeat. Frank, on the other hand, found unexpected peace as an advisor to the foundation, contributing his administrative experience to strengthen the project. Hope approached her mother and sat beside her, contemplating the same landscape. "You know what's most extraordinary, Mom? That it all began with a drought that seemed like the end of our world." Martha smiled, taking her daughter's hand. "That's life, sweetheart. Sometimes we need everything to dry up to discover the deepest roots." And as the first stars appeared in the sky of Clearwater Valley, mother and daughter remained silent, contemplating the everyday miracle of a town that had found, between calloused hands and firm wills, the strength to write its own story. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Martha and the women of Clearwater Valley has touched your hearts. As they taught us, true transformation is born from unity and persistence in the face of adversity. To continue this emotional journey, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories of communities reinventing themselves. Find it here by clicking to your left. If this struggle for dignity and autonomy moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we share stories that celebrate resistance and hope in our communities. Do you know similar examples in your own regions? We await you in the comments to build together a network of inspiration.